Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dental Innovator podcast. Today, we're talking to someone completely different to anyone else we've ever had on the podcast. He is Mohammed Bouaziz, and to describe him is tricky, but he's a nomad, he's a healer, he does specifically somatic healing, he hosts retreats sometimes and does coaching. So he's an enigmatic fella. It'll be a very interesting conversation, a very varied conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, Mohammed.
Thank you for having me, man. Pleasure to be here.
And you're currently in Morocco, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So when I say you're a nomad,
Yeah.
yeah, we've been testing internet beforehand, so he's definitely a nomad. We can verify it.
I was made sure that I found the best spot of internet where I am. So, but no, yeah, I'm currently in North Africa. And it was a couple of 1,000-kilometer journey to be where I am right now on the road.
The first question I always ask on the podcast is, what's your mission? What's your driving force? Why are you here? So how would you summarize that for me?
Cool. Yeah. So, I suppose I've been on a mission to find my mission for a long time, without consciously knowing that was the case. But yeah, there are archetypes. I believe that every human being is looking for and on the same journey to understanding these things, these archetypes. So for me, one of them is purpose, to live with purpose, intentionally wake up every morning with a purpose to make impact and to impact myself, to experience what it means to be human, and to taste all of the possibilities of what it means to be human. And then to make impact, that outweighs or lives deeper than my lifetime. So being able to influence people way after I'm gone. And obviously, I'm not really focusing too much on influencing anybody outside of the people that I surround myself with. So my family, my children, my focus is to show my children how to live with purpose, to make impact on our stay on earth, and to leave them some downloads so they can pursue their mission and express themselves when I'm no longer here. So that's basically it as an archetype in a nutshell.
You're someone who I've followed for a long time. You've got quite a unique angle on health and well-being. And obviously you've got your own recipe book that you released recently as well.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic, by the way. I love the photography and the care and attention obviously gone into that.
Thank you, man.
How does your philosophy on health and well-being juxtapose or oppose the kind of common things that we understand and are taught from a young age?
Cool. My understanding of health has evolved over the last few decades. I always understood health to be, or being healthy to be centered around drugs and being surrounded by doctors in white lab coats. But my philosophy on health now has evolved to a very holistic level. Even within my journey as a alternative therapist, I found that my work is extremely different and unorthodox, in comparison to a lot of alternative therapists who are alternative to the mainstream allopathic drug and surgery based approach of medicine. So the average person, if they have an issue, they won't really do anything with their health. They'll just live life, going to work, doing their business day to day until something troubles them enough to get their attention. Usually it is pain, physical pain. And, that stimulus into the physical body, the result of that is somebody will go to a GP surgery and look for a diagnosis. That conversation and that dialogue tends to last a few minutes, and that individual who is usually in pain walks out with a prescription of some sort of pharmaceutical medication. and they carry on about their business, popping these pills a few times a day, as per the doctor's approach or recommendation, until they stop working and they go back, and it's a perpetual cycle. So that's the conventional model, and it's a reactive approach to wellness. People think that their health is just constantly going to stay good or get better, which is not realistic. People, as they age, their health status declines, especially in the age we live in. So unless there is a proactive approach to your wellness and to your health status, what you would expect is degeneration of some sort, in the physical body. But my work is far more deeper than just the physical body. I work with the emotional body, the psycho-emotional body, and then also the spiritual body, because the human being is a complex organism. And that is unfortunately what mainstream medicine does not address or have interventions for, and what I do is not ultimately unique to me. There are many people that have tapped into this universal truth. I believe that what I work with and what I seek to work with is the most optimal expression of working in unison with the universal truth. Okay, so I have not, this isn't unique to me, or this isn't something I patent, or this is something I attribute to myself. It's actually something that I believe that I've tapped into, which has always been here. It's always been available and accessible to people who are sincere in their approach to healing people. And you refer to me as a healer. I never refer to myself as a healer. I don't heal people. I act as a medium, as an inspiration for people to tap into their own capacity to self-regulate, and then, seek aid and assistance and healing from the Most High. So I'm not a healer, but I am into healing. I'm passionate about healing. The only person I try my best to heal is myself. And then the work I do is a constant dialogue between people where I'm sharing my experiences from a place of intuition, from a place of connection, and also from a place of some level of scientific and literature-based rationale. Okay, but it's kind of a balance between your literature-driven scientific geek and your wise man healer from the jungle. It's kind of it's like a merge, an amalgamation of these two energies. And that's the balance we seek in creation. Creation is all about balance. Healing is about balance. So coming to understand the composition of the human being and how balance is essential to that in the biopsychosocial spiritual profiles which we kind of contain as humans, that's where my work lies. And I'm constantly growing in understanding and wisdom to try and help my patients heal better and help me live a better life and help my family live a better life.
So often chronic pain is something that's really in the zeitgeist at the minute. It's something that people are really exploring. I came across it first when I read a book called The Presence Process a long time ago. And the man in it, the author, Michael C. Brown, he described at the start of that book having a debilitating neurological disorder that was causing him extreme pain. And yet visiting shamans and all sorts of healers because he tried everything Western medicine had to offer and nothing was helping. And it ended up being a internal journey of resolving trauma that led to the resolution of this pain, this chronic pain that he was suffering.
Yeah.
That might be a completely alien thing for people to hear, right? But
yeah.
How big a part does emotional trauma play in health and pain experience and all of this stuff?
Very good question, man. I've found myself over the last 5-6 years really going deep down the rabbit hole of resolving my own traumas. And, I am the work that I do and the transformations that come about from people that visit me in my practice is centered around working on healing trauma, right? Trauma is fundamental. understanding what trauma is. First, we have to define what trauma is, because the conventional model, everybody accepts that, you go to a trauma unit in the hospital, you go to A&E, and this is trauma, and there's this kind of indoctrination into what trauma is from a physical standpoint, where people are watching television and all these medical series where people are constantly going into A&E and having their life saved, and CPR and car crash and motorbike accident, serial killer husbands, all of that stuff, right? But trauma, what I believe you're referring to, is that on the emotional level. And this is the fascinating thing that I've found about the human body, is its ability to retain information. Because trauma is a, or the body is the nervous system, and the neuroendocrine system are incredible kind of subsystems of the whole human organism. And when you come to realize that your life is just a collection of experiences, and your conscious and subconscious kind of nervous system, your thought patterns, your decision making, your choice making, the things that you aspire to do and become, and the things that it turn you on in life, and the things that you find affinity to, a lot of this can be attributed to your initial experiences as a child in your formative years, as your nervous system is developing and understanding its environment before conception. Right, so there's a lot of people that I've met that their major trauma begins at birth, right? And how are you ever going to be able to remember that? You can't. But we have to define what a human being is first of all, right? Because everybody's talking about memory and remembering trauma. Your body remembers everything. It's a memory bank. But then it's whether your conscious spiritual state, your soul, your identity, who you really are, that's not your body. Well, I don't believe that. Mainstream medicine will disagree. But, we understand the human being as a complex organism juxtaposed between body and spirit. And the actual essence of who you are is your spiritual self. Right? It's this thing that people are trying to define and have been trying to define for millennia. So trauma, if we bring it back down, trauma that you're talking about, most people that I work with have got, autoimmune conditions. They have like fibromyalgia, they have, multiple sclerosis, or they have issues gaining or losing weight. They have eating disorders, kind of bipolar episodes or anxiety, depression disorders, all of these kind of physiological, psychological manifestations of pain, right? Emotional pain. And some level of disturbance in the self, which imbalances the person, and creates, what we would diagnose clinically as a disease, right? Everybody's sick, or everybody's unwell. You've got people that are walking around like a couple of weeks away from a heart attack, and they are clinically healthy until they have a myocardial infarction. So trauma is this thing where if people engage it, they start to actively sit back and explore their human experiences from an objective standpoint. And you will find that everyone that you work with, especially in the medical field or the dentistry field, where people end up in this career path, it's like, why did you want to, of all the things in life, why did you want to become a dentist, right? Or why did you want to be a doctor? Is that a learned behavior? Is that something innately within yourself? Is it something you just randomly, you know what I mean? So trauma really is you can't summarize it, but it's this fascinating reality where emotional trauma or experiences that aren't necessarily favorable to what we should have had, the things that we deserve to have as humans, love, compassion, safety, all these things, trauma exists in the kind of the opposite realm of these experiences. And it was, I remember, I think it was Gabor Mate, who's one of the leading kind of physicians in trauma and medicine, right? And kind of trauma and disease. And he's demonstrated multiple times, and the people that he kind of affiliates with, how trauma or suppression of emotions causes, debilitating disease. We're talking multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, ALS, all of these like chronic pain issues which arise in the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. A lot of them can be traced back to an experience that shouldn't have happened to you, or a lack of an experience that should have happened to you. Because, trauma is not what happens to you, right? Trauma is what happens inside of you. This is again another saying of Gabor. And I agree with a lot of the things he says, not everything, but he's definitely a kind of a leading expert in the field, and he's onto a lot of truth. So my work really, that's why you introduced me talking about the somatic system. Most people in the mainstream world, they'll work with GPs, alternative therapists, chiropractors, massage therapists, physiotherapists, Reiki healers, and people will always reach a plateau until they address their trauma, right? And I make it a focus from the very get-go of my consultations to go straight there, because I don't like to waste people's time or money. And it's very easy for me, from just a medical kind of history, to put people's clinical kind of symptoms with their kind of emotional / psychological profiles. And, you look at childhood, you look at early adulthood, and you can tell everything about a human being. And I don't like to judge, right? But part of my work necessitates that I objectively judge people's histories. So to summarize your question, trauma is fundamental. Understanding it is fundamental. And unless you tap into the realm of people's traumas, or unless people are open enough to go there, they will never be able to reach optimal health. And like I've said before, optimal health is just a beginning to life. It's not the end goal, So you will never really start to live until you stop seeing the world from your experiences, and you start seeing the world from a place of presence. And this is children up until they start having their lives ruined by adults, have this incredible window where they're experiencing this realm in the most beautiful way. And then usually traumatized adults come in and ruin it for their kids, and it's perpetually passed down through generations. So that's the work that I do, and it's definitely powerful, and then just to add to that acts as a foundation to any of the physical therapy that I do, or any of the, if you're a dentist, or you're whatever type of therapist you are, and you're working open-mindedly with kind of the emotions and the body and the soul, all these things, having trauma can then act as a baseline for you to implement your strategies and your interventions more effectively. Understand? Otherwise, if you completely ignore the reality of an emotional, ignore the emotional reality of that human being you're dealing with, then you'll never be able to effectively implement your strategies. So if you're a sincere healer, or if you're sincerely into helping change people's lives, you're going to have to go there. If you're about making money, then it's cool, because you'll just have people constantly come on your bandwagon of practice, and you'll milk them of whatever they have until they realize you can no longer help them. And then you do that to enough people, and you can have a very successful business. But that's not what I do. And
I think it's an important point that Bouaziz is basically, for example, a dentist might say to a patient, you need to quit smoking, right? And might say, it's this bad for you, it's this bad for you because of this and this and this and this, right? But the reality is, you just saying that to a patient is that going to yield an outcome that's favorable for the patient most often? Or is it worthwhile actually exploring, like, why? When did you start? what
Yeah.
created this habit.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, you know?
Exactly. I used to smoke, you know. I'm very open about my past, you know, decision making. There was a time where, you know, and everything I'm talking about it from a place of understanding it rationally and scientifically, whatever, but also having an experience of it and me having to work through my stuff. And I was an addict. I was a drug abuser. I was a smoker, and you know, all praise to God. Now I don't do any of that stuff. And I went through the conventional, I need to quit strategies, and working on the symptoms, which was the smoking and the drug abuse. But the drug abuse and the smoking is a symptom. It's not the problem. The problem is the pain that it's trying to suppress, and the pain it's trying to remedy. So once I started focusing on why I was in pain, and once the physical pain, we went part through the physical pain layer, and we went into the emotional pain layer, I'd obviously unearthed so much. And then once you explore and you understand that there's a lot of pain and trauma there, which is fueling your drug abuse or your alcoholism or your smoking or your excessive spending, you know what I mean, or your, you know, your womanizing, whatever it is, then you realize that you're faced with a choice as an adult. And in that moment, you have a choice to stay a child, you know, in an adult body, right? And keep working from monkey mind and child mind, or you evolve into an adult mind and start to take responsibility for your actions. And I certainly I've had to go through that, and it's been very challenging, because to kind of reshape your identity or your definition of self and who you are, you have to go deep into your formative years. For everything that you were taught and that you learned growing into this human experience, you have to unlearn that, you know, and that is a lifelong practice that requires a deep level of discipline and dedication, because you have to watch what you eat, you have to watch what you think, you have to unlearn certain behaviors, certain movement patterns, you have to unlearn certain dialogues, you have to unlearn so much and relearn so much. But what's fascinating is the capacity within the brain for neuroplasticity, right? The brain and by extension the whole nervous system, you know, is malleable. You know, we can keep evolving our bank of information and experiences. It doesn't have to stop, you know. And this whole thing of, you know, you kind of mainstream model is, you know, you have this systemized approach to life. You go to school, then you go to college, then you go to uni, then you get a job, and then you do some of that for a while, and then you retire, and it's like, what the bullshit? It's absolutely nonsense, right? And then, you know, when you get old, you can't exercise anymore because you're old, and you have to sit in the chair, and it's like, what's going on? But, you know, there's so many things modern medicine and modern science has so, you know, they know the truth, and they have information, they have data which they cannot deny about the human body, but what gets passed down and filtered to the mainstream and to the average Joe is lacking, you know. So we know that exercise is important for, you know, resistance exercise is important for maintaining muscle mass as you age. The more you age, the more you have to keep training, right? But everyone's telling you to stop and take it easy and retire. And no, you got to keep moving. And you come to Morocco, right? You see these people here. It's fascinating. You see it. The older population. I haven't seen one obese old person. When I say old, I'm talking above 60. Yeah, that's not old. But I see lean, tanned, happy, vibrant people who are sitting on the floor. They don't need assistance, you know. And I'm like, why is it in these underdeveloped countries, the older population they look in shape, right? And they don't go into the gym. They don't have access to you know, the pool spa facilities. But they're much healthier than you go to the West, and you see so many of the elderly people. They're with walking sticks, they're on wheelchairs, there's movable motorbike things. So there's definitely a lack of respect for what it means to attain good movement, good posture. And for me, it's all about redefining the meaning of what it means to be healthy and to seek balance in a human being. So that's, I think, I don't know, I went on a rabbit hole, but coming back to the average person and what they understand about themselves and how they can change their reality, it begins with understanding that the things that happen to you, you no longer have to keep focusing on them, and you can change them, and it just takes a lifelong dedication to want to change and to give up the things which are killing you. And the things that are killing you is not the smoking, the drugs, or the alcohol. The things that are killing you is the attachments to those experiences and those traumas which you had as a child, or in your life. I meet women who are kind of divorced. I remember working with a woman a few months ago, and she's in her mid-40s, and she literally was on cancer medication, and she was gaining weight, and she wasn't in a good place. She was on a lot, multiple hormone replacements, and her whole thing was 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago, her fiance walked out on her, on another woman, and since then her health has declined, and now she has cancer. Like, now, how can you tell me? Like, she goes to the GP and the doctor, and they've got her on all these medications, these drugs. Why is nobody addressing the fact that that there is a correlation between her emotional status and the growth of a big ass tumor in her body? All right, the doctors don't want to go there, and I find that just like insane.
Well, you know what? That's a very interesting one, because I was on a retreat when I was much younger, and I had the advantage of being on retreats like this is a blessing. And the guy said to me, we were getting very, very in tune with our bodies. So he'd get us to think about something that made us angry. It's like, I want you to watch for the reaction in your body and the energy. Can you actually feel it? And from a young age, I got attuned to actually feeling these phenomenon pop up into my body, in my chest and my stomach.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to have this real one-to-one correlation between thought, intention, emotional trauma, and actual physical feelings and perceptions. And it's like, what is holding on to that energy actually doing to me on the inside? And a lot of people might hear that statement that you just said and what I just said and think, sounds mad. But the only way you're going to know is if you actually go in and do some work. Find out for yourself. Like, is there a link, And I do it with my kids. So my kids are little, and you'll say to them, can you feel that energy of that frustration in your stomach and your chest? And they'll be like, yeah, I can feel it. Like, okay, fill the balloon up with that energy and let it go. It doesn't need to be there. It's making you hurt. It's difficult sometimes to communicate some of these things because they are quite alien concepts. But what would be something that you did, Bouaziz, when you were in the middle of your dark period? What allowed you and what helped you? What practices maybe that helped you to maybe shine a spotlight on these things and help you deal with them?
Cool. I think it's a real shame that maybe a lot of people that are watching this who come from more of an institutionalized background have a skepticism or somewhat of like a, look at the work that I do and maybe some of the things I'm saying and go, man, this guy's such a hippie. You know what I mean? What's this guy on about? But everything that I love people to challenge what I do, and I love having dialogue and discourse with fellow practitioners just so we can help, open perspectives a little bit. The stuff that I'm saying is not alien or jungle medicine. It can be proven through literature and science. It's just we have to be open as professionals to try and evolve our practices to best serve, creation, to best serve humanity. Because if that's really what we're on about doing, then we have to be open-minded. And school doesn't stop when you get your degree and now you can go and open your practice. You should keep growing and evolving your understanding of reality and seeking knowledge. So an example to your question would be, the breath. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody's by now watching this has heard or come across people pushing breath and breath work. And there's, yoga centers all over the world and yoga retreats everywhere and people doing courses on breath work and it's popping up and people are making a lot of money on breath work. And I hope I can inspire at least one person who's watching this, who is a physician who works with health, to look into breath, and maybe they can make loads of money from that. Amazing. And I hope they can share that money with people that need it. Right? But if you understand the mechanism of breathing in the human anatomy and the neuroendocrine, the neurological and the endocrinological implications of correct breathing and suboptimal breathing. So when you work with people who have got anxiety, or they have depression, or they have fatigue, or they have mood swings, a lot of people, they have sleep apnea, they snore, right? Or all of these clinical presentations people might come in with. A lot of it can be traced back to incorrect breathing mechanics, And how does this link to the trauma and the emotions we've been talking about? Ultimately, when you have a traumatic experience, your body releases stress hormone, right? It's your cortisol. Cortisol shoots up. Adrenal glands secrete, stress hormone. Adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys, and their job is to save your ass when there is a problem. There's a danger. There's a stimulus which puts your life in danger. Now, when you have an experience from an abusive family member, the body responds in the same way. Whether there's a lion in the room, or there's a car shooting across the road, or you have an abusive partner, same mechanism. Adrenal glands secrete stress hormone. Where does that stress hormone end up? In the bloodstream. Where does the blood go? Everywhere. It goes from the arteries to the capillaries, into the microcirculation, into the tissues. Now, if that trauma, that emotion has not, has solidified itself as part of your identity, now you're constantly reliving that memory, right? Now, what happens when you're constantly having an input of cortisol and stress hormone into microcirculation into the cells, right? That starts to create, some level of stagnation and lack of oxygenation. It doesn't allow the lymph to move properly, and then you start to get a development of all sorts of lack of movement in and around cell, right? Now, when you breathe, the same thing happens. You breathe in oxygen. We hope we're breathing in crap nowadays, living in central London. Well, I'm not in central London, that's blessed. But I choose where I live because, the air quality that I breathe is very important because it's essential to my function as a human being. But back to the point, you breathe oxygen, you breathe air, whatever's in the air. Hopefully it's high percentages of oxygen. That gets processed by all of these beautiful, art forms in the lungs, the bronchioles, the bronchi, the bronchioles, come the alveoli, you get all this gas exchange, and then you get oxygen that goes from the larger blood vessels into the smaller blood vessels, right? Now, when you're not breathing properly and you're stress breathing from a place of emotional trauma, you're hyperventilating. Your ability to actually take in oxygen is diminished. Your ability to utilize your diaphragm is diminished, all right? So you get a lot of people with anxiety, they're just trapped here. They're just they're literally dying because they're not breathing properly. Why they're not breathing properly? Because the air quality is not good? No, it's because mechanically they're in a stress state, right? Because of this emotional trauma, this memory which is solidified as part of their identity. Now, instead of breathing diaphragmatically from the lower lobes of the lung and drawing air and having this movement of the diaphragm, which, and this healthy contraction of your intercostals, your rib cage, that moves your bowels, and you start to get all this movement of energy in and around your solar plexus. There's none of that solar plexus movement. Everything stagnates. You're just breathing from here, right? Hyperventilating, right? That affects your blood pressure, that affects your air quality, that affects your current stress state, right? And it's this perpetual cycle. So breathing and understanding how to breathe is transformative to people, because once you learn how to breathe properly from the diaphragm, how children breathe, how healthy human beings breathe, nasally instead of from the mouth, you start to unlock all these things in the body that are not working properly. So a lot of patients that I see, they come into my clinic and I do a physical examination. I do an emotional examination. I do a physical examination. Look at the spine, look at the muscles, look at the fascia, see how they're moving, look at the balance, their coordination, all this stuff. Like, one of the most focal points of my assessment always happens when I'm assessing people's diaphragm and their abdomen, right? Because people have got abdominal bloating, right? And then you feel their diaphragm is super tender. There's no movement in the diaphragm, right? You ask them to take a breath and they're breathing from their chest. And no wonder there's no movement in the bowel of the gas, because there's trapped gas in the bowel, because there's no movement of the diaphragm that's moving, mobilizing and massaging that bowel internally. So you get these people who are stuck down here. Yeah, there's no movement and there's stagnation. They have all these bowel issues. And that's why they're having anxiety and mood disorders, because the bacteria in the microbiome is not moving very well. When they eat, they don't eat from a place of rest and digest. They eat from a place of stress. So they eat really quickly. They don't chew their food. They eat and drink. They eat junk. They eat sugar. They eat fat, because they're motivated by stress. So one of the biggest healing methods that exists on earth, which is absolutely free and it just takes a little bit of practice, is breath, right? Corrective breathing. And most people that walk into a doctor's surgery, guaranteed, are not breathing properly. And because they're not breathing properly, their life force, the actual thing, which is, the most important nutrient to everything, is oxygen. And if your gateway and your capacity to uptake oxygen is minimized every day, because you're living in stress mode, because your environment is stressing you out, because your partner is stressing you out, your job is stressing you out, because your memories and your experiences of the past are stressing you out, then you're not going to be able to breathe, even if you're sitting near an ocean. You know what I mean? The cleanest air. So that helped me when I realized that smoking, I was just trying to breathe. Right? That's what I was trying to do. I'd been so constricted emotionally, so suppressed emotionally, that the smoking was trying to give me something. And there's an intelligence there. Everyone who smokes has this primal intelligence within them. They know air is important. They know oxygen is important. All right. And everyone is going, you know what? I need time out. Leave me alone. I need some time for myself. That's important. All right. Putting yourself first. You know what? Don't want to work. Don't want to cook food. I don't want to do anything. Right now, I need 5 minutes to myself. Me time. And me time. The smokers, they're onto something. Right? I was onto something. Right? Me time. And I'm going to try and use this me time to breathe. But you're breathing with your mouth, taking in something with a ton of carcinogens and carbon monoxide in it. So as soon as I replaced that cigarette with just oxygen, and as soon as I replaced that mouth breathing with nasal breathing, and then as soon as I replaced that 5 minutes of me time to 18 hours of me time, right, things started to change. I removed people that were, I removed toxic environments, toxic people, toxic foods, toxic, cigarettes from my life, toxic drugs. And then the body, because it's an intelligent creation, knew how to self-regulate. It started to put things back into perspective from inside itself. And then as I start to feel better, I'm starting to get more energy, more focus, more clarity, more motivation. I'm able to perpetuate these good decisions every day. And then before you know it, these decisions which I'm making, I've been making for a few weeks, I'm now making them for a few years, and my body is now in a much better place to deal with its shit, So today, I've been on this journey about 8-9 years. I'm in a much better place to deal with all that bad stuff that happened to me when I was younger, right? And I'm in a better place to handle those perpetrators. And I'm in a really good place mentally that I am consciously aware of my environment, and I do not allow stress to enter me now. Like, now I'm proactive about where I go, who I'm with, what I do, what I eat. Whereas when I was younger, I didn't have the power to do so. So I'm having to undo those memories in my body through my musculoskeletal system, right? In my nervous system, I'm trying to undo what happened to me 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But as a conscious, sovereign man, adult, right, I take responsibility for my choices. So now moving forward, I'm very conscious and observant of where I set foot. And that's why I do the work that I do, and I eat the way I eat, and I live and I have conversations with people I have conversations with. I'm selective about how I live life. I don't just live life willy-nilly. Life doesn't just happen to me. I'm consciously, mindfully maneuvering through this human experience because I respect and value myself, because my body is very essential and very important and warrants respect. And it has a certain standard of expectation. My body needs a certain level of nutrition. It needs a certain level of experience and love and air and all of this stuff, you know? So once there's two levels to this stuff. Once you're in the process of undoing all the shit that happened to you in the past, you know, a good therapist that you work with should start to teach you and help you take power and control of making the right decisions moving forward. Because you can't just perpetually just remain in the past. There's no fun in that, you know. And I meet a lot of people that are constantly healing their shit. That's boring, right? You're not going to just keep healing your traumas. You can't just sit in that mindset. You know, you have to live life. You have to look into the future. You can't just be a victim, stay a victim. So it's just, you know, there's a healthy balance that needs to remain in healing your shit, and then also having the courage or the audacity to try life again. You know what I mean? And that's
sometimes in creating that victim mentality, that healing your shit mode, you end up becoming identified as your shit. That's the only thing that you've got in your life, you know? And that's quite common now, Bouaziz. I see it a lot. Like, people almost take pride in their trauma.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's propagating it, right?
Yeah. And again, unless you tap into a universal truth, you will always miss the point, because everything that I do is dictated by guidance. It doesn't come from within myself. I follow guidance. And the guidance, I believe, comes from an intelligent creator, an intelligent being, a supreme, you know, being, which has the archetypes of all. So when I tap into a guidance, I'm no longer focusing too much or going too extreme in anything. You know, I don't want to go too extreme in being a victim and being sick, and I don't want to go too extreme in healing my shit. Right? I want to be alive and living and experiencing. I'm saying, a child, you know, I observe my little one, and he's in, you know, 2 feet away from danger, like 2 feet away from being a dead body, and he's just like, oh, everything's jolly, right? And I'm like, yeah, she's dead, right? And that's because my conditioning and his conditioning are far different. We're in the same place. So there's a lot of, that's why, you know, I speak about this a lot. A lot of people forget the mainstream medical approach, which doesn't work. It does not work. It's unsuccessful. And the stats are there. The data is there. You can go and have a look how mainstream medicine, drug and surgery-based medicine, you know, is one of the leading causes of mortality in the Western world. So you don't need to take my word for it. Go and look at the data. I'm talking about the alternative therapists, the people that are into all this alternative stuff, who are capitalizing on people because they want to keep people in this healing mode. I don't want to keep people in healing mode. You know, I want to get people in and out of my stuff ASAP. You know, and I want to go and define the archetypes. I want to give them an understanding, and then, you know, teach them enough where they no longer need me. And because everybody's on a different journey, you know, kind of stage in their journey, my contact time with patients always varies, because I have an intuitive way of working with people. I connect with them and I see what they need and I see what I can give them. There is no systemized approach. It doesn't make it a very good business. I'm not into business. Do you understand? I'm into human experience. My food always shows up on my plate one way or another. So I don't have to worry about that. I'm taken care of. All praise to God. You know what I mean? I don't need to have my stuff calculated and pre-programmed, because that's not how I design the way I earn my money. I'm a nomad in the way I travel. I'm a nomad in the way I eat. I live. I'm a nomad in the way I work. You know, I just keep serving, keep putting out the love, and I get taken care of. No problem. Do you understand? So when we look at the alternative therapists, I'm ashamed for a lot of them, because they want to keep people in healing mode, and they want to kind of capitalize on people being in pain. You know, I don't like that. You know what I mean? And I don't want to capitalize on your trauma. but I definitely will shed enough light on the trauma to get you to understand and inspire you to get out of that, and then work together from a place of compassion and love to get you out of that and give you the baton. You have to change your shit. Can't outsource that to me, but I will be a brother and a mirror to you, and I will share my stuff and show you how possible it is for you to get out of that, that's why I believe every practitioner, every physician should be a living example of what they do. They should practice what they preach, and practicing what you preach and having a successful business are two different realities. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, there's a lot of successful brothers out there in the eyes of society, and sisters, successful in the eyes of the bank balance, successful in the eyes of company's house. But that's not my definition of success. Do you understand? My definition of success is completely different. So I choose to, empower my clients from a place of leading by example, and in that way, I don't have to be insecure about my practice. If people don't want to work with me, no problem. It's cool. They can go find someone else to go and give their bullshit to, but not me. If you want to change, we can make it happen. We can get to business, and every person I work with that I retain, they can speak for me because it's real, and a lot of them will say that they've had to put in a lot of work and they've had to give up a lot of things. I vet my people. I don't work with people anymore that are going to waste my time, because I don't have to convince you that your life is worth living. I don't have to convince you that your body is sacred and that you should do better. I work with people that are ready to invest in themselves, who know that they're worth so much more than what they've got, and they're ready to have someone help them along the way. So there's no one size fits all approach. Breath work is going to work for some people. It's not going to work with other people. And breath work is just a piece of the bigger puzzle. That's why, unless you're in, I find what I find fascinating the most is the concept of hikmah, right? Wisdom. This is an ancient kind of, the wise man or the healer in our tradition is called the hakim, right? He's into wisdom. He's not into knowledge, right? And unfortunately, we find a lot of people that are taking knowledge and implementing it into successful systems, which have an effective course of treatment and output until they reach a plateau. Whereas the hakim, instead of bringing people back into balance, real quickly and then having to face another stumbling block, they take time to unravel all of these intricacies and then open up someone's life forever. And that's what I try to do, and that's what I'm pursuing. Is wisdom.
Passing the baton, giving them the skills. Yeah,
giving them the skills.
One thing that you've touched on there in different words, but something that is really important is to really become aware of our unconscious drivers. So often we feel like we're in control, but the reality is you're not really in control. You're performing habitual action. You're performing habitual patterns because you've always done it, and starting to explore that. And what gets you to that point often is getting to a critical mass of pain. A critical mass of pain where pain is the driver for change, right? But if you're someone who's looking at preventative medicine and therapy, how can you get there or help people get there without them having to experience that critical mass of pain? Like what kind of changes can they easily make to navigate that without having to experience the massive degree of suffering that's often required?
Yeah. Human beings are tough creatures, man. Most people watching this will see sense in what you just said, right? But then they'll still opt for the mass suffering before they do anything about their stuff. Because humans are heedless creatures. They are lazy creatures. And
they've got a high threshold for suffering, man.
Yeah. Humans just want to learn the hard way. And that's centered around egocentrism, which is a shame. But the societies we live in, they are driving the constructs of the societies are massive drivers of these motives for people subconsciously. People are just doing stuff and they don't even know why they're doing it, and that's because they are subconsciously indoctrinated into a society which is intricately, controlling the minds of people and inspiring them to do things without them even knowing. right? And that's the, you know, it's like the Matrix, but it's not the Matrix. It's deeper than that. So, and you know, I really believe that people need to bring themselves into account before they are brought into account. And this pain thing that you've just spoken, define, is the body bringing the self into account, right? But we have to start moving from a place of intelligence and higher selves, yeah, not from a place of lower self, not from a place of just the physiological, and because that's the pain that brings people back on track, the one we spoke about at the beginning, this physical pain, right? And this physical pain is obviously heavily linked with the emotional pain, because the emotions flow through the bloodstream, and the bloodstream is a physical phenomenon, right? So people talk about, oh, how I feel. You feel with the body. You're not feeling with the brain, you're feeling with the body. So emotions and physical pain, emotional pain, physical pain are the same thing. But people need to start moving from a place of spiritual awareness. When you start moving from a place of spiritual awareness, that's really when you can have the advantage of bringing yourself into account and taking yourself out of the train track and watching the train go, thinking, man, if I carry on in this route, right, I'm going to crash, you know? And that's why what there's a lot of people in we haven't touched upon this, but they're pushing psychedelic therapy massively, right? And that's coming, that's going to be, you know, that's huge in the future. But people are using controlled psychedelic therapy in a legal way to work with, you know, stopping people from reaching this state of, you know, amassing so much pain that it can be chronic and could end up killing them. But what psychedelic therapy offers you is it takes you away from this subconscious neural programming, which you've taken as normality, as self, and it just allows you to experience the present moment for what it is. All right. And my proposition to people is we don't need psychedelics, or we don't need, you know, kind of plant medicine or anything kind of to enhance our cognitive behavior, right? We can just self-regulate from a place of spirit, where our spirit takes control of our choice making. It taps into a higher reality. It taps into higher languages. It taps into better, more systemized processes of being. And through these guidances, we can go, hang on a second, what am I doing? Where's it going to take me? Like, where am I going to end up? You know, and it takes a very courageous human being to stop themselves and question themselves, you know. And that's why parenting is important. If we had the right caregivers growing up, we may be programmed better in that. But a lot of us, we don't. Do you understand? We've had abusive parents, and I'm not talking about parents who are, you know, beating you and swearing at you and kind of giving you pain. I'm just talking about parents who were not emotionally open. I'm talking about parents who didn't give you that deep spiritual, emotional connection as a child. Parents who weren't present. Parents that put food on the table and gave you a roof over your head, but not parents that were spiritually present with you. So my advice, I believe the solution is that without a spiritual practice, without a higher purpose in life, without tapping into a universal truth, we will never be able to self-regulate, because without that, there is no employment of something greater than ourselves, something far more powerful and more intelligent than ourselves to show us the way. Because after your parents are no longer here, and you've grown and evolved into adulthood, who now has your authority over you? Who tells you what you should do? Especially when you're a little boy in an adult suit, driving your toy car and wearing your nice toy watch and going to your really beautiful office. When your ego's up between your nostrils, right? And you're pumped full of, you know, protein powder, and you think you're the shit. Who are you going to take advice from then? You understand? So unless you're humble enough to receive advice, just understand that type of archetype, a very arrogant, narcissistic, self-centered, man who's got it all. Nice car, nice watch. I'm talking to a lot of these dentists right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking to you, Mr. Dentist, Mr. Doctor. You know, I'm talking to you. You got a nice car, nice watch, nice suit, you know, good tailor. You got nice, you know, kind of safety net in your bank balance. But your wife don't like you. She thinks you're an arsehole. Your kids don't like you. They think you're an arsehole. Like, what then? Who are you going to take advice from? Who's going to bring you in check? Maybe it's me. You know? But that's not how it's meant to be. That's not a consistent universal truth. There has to be something greater, something more real and substantial that has the ability, the wisdom, and the patience and the reverence to be able to bring every living creature into check and into balance. And that is a spiritual reality that needs to be explored by every human being who wants to actually receive success in life. And I'll end it in that, you know, why are you asked me at the beginning, why do I do what I do? Like, what is my driving factor? Like, my question to your listeners and your viewers and your fellow professionals is, why do you do what you do? And I guarantee a lot of you watching this, if you're honest and sincere with yourselves, you've got it going well in life from a a material perspective, but are you really happy? You understand? Why are you doing what you're doing? And why are you waking up in the morning and you're not feeling it? And you've got all this nice stuff around you. And the truth is, it's because materialism, just like mainstream allopathic physical pain relief medicine can bring you to a certain level and plateau you, so is living from just a perspective of materialism. You know, if you don't transcend that and go into the spiritual realities, you will never achieve, you know, happiness and peace and fulfillment in life that, you know, someone who doesn't necessarily have the material success you have will always attain when they're tapping on the door of spiritual kind of humility. You understand? And that is really the ultimate medicine, understanding how to stay humble and grateful and outsourcing your happiness and your contentment to something bigger than yourself. What that is should be explored by every human being, you know.
Well put, man. Well put. I think we should end it there because that was a really nice, clean sweep of everything. I want to thank you so much for your time, Bouaziz. I could talk to you forever, mate.
Inshallah, I'll meet you in person soon.
Thanks for listening. Please leave a positive review and share the podcast to your circle. If you'd like to touch base with Dr. Harry Gill or inquire about mentoring, email the Dental Innovator Podcast at gmail.com.